Recently, Caitlin Thomas from Yale Law School's Public Affairs Office visited with rare book librarian Mike Widener for an exclusive tour of the diverse and unique collection of rare books currently residing at the Yale Law School.
Hello, Caitlin.
Hi, thanks for meeting with us.
My pleasure, and welcome to the Pascas Danziger Rare Book Room here at the Yale Law Library. It's a great facility. I can start out talking about that. Thanks to the generosity of the Danziger brothers, we have, for the first time in the history of this library, a special-built, custom-made facility for our rare book collection. The collection itself, we've got about 50,000 volumes of rare books. Our strengths are Anglo-American common law in particular. Also, we have really good collections of Roman law, canon law, European law, and we're building a lot of new areas in the collection. Tell a little bit about the history of the collection. The library is the main reason that this law school still exists. The Yale Law School began as a proprietary law school downtown by the courthouse. The law schools began in the early 19th century. At about 1845, there was danger that this law school was going to disappear because the faculty died. So Yale University put up the money to acquire the school. And what they really wanted was the library. The bar in New Haven was very concerned that this great library that Staples and Hitchcock and Daggett had put together for their students was going to disappear. So they lobbied the university to take over the school, mainly because of the library. And one of the outstanding collections we have here is called the Founders Collection. These are the books that Hitchcock and Daggett and Staples actually used to teach their students. This is one of the examples here. This is Cruz's Digest of Real Property. And the great thing about this book is it has annotations here. These are from the 1840s, showing when the students, the dates they actually began their recitations in class from this book. So you can see how law was taught in the early days of the Yale Law School from this book here. We also have some early notebooks. This is from a student named Charles Russ, who was a student in the proprietary law school in the 1830s. And these are his notes from the lectures. I love this in particular because it says here at the bottom, finis or end, thank God, July 12th, 1833. So you can see law students weren't quite so different even back then from the way they are now. He was happy that that part of the course was over. This is one of my favorite volumes. One of the interesting things in general, a lot of these books have stories to tell. This book was acquired by the library in the 1870s. You can see it has a stamp here from the Harvard Law Library. Harvard in the 19th century sold off a lot of their duplicates. This is a multi-volume set on Roman law by a Dutchman named Heinetius. Has this great inscription here telling, and I believe this is Justice Joseph Story's handwriting, he tells how he ordered this book from Italy. The book was on its way over to the United States during the War of 1812 when a British frigate called the Guerriere captured the ship and these books. Later, that ship was involved in a famous naval battle with the Americans under Captain Isaac Hall. I believe it's the Constitution. He actually recaptured this set of books from the British and then went and delivered them to Justice Joseph Story at Harvard. And it explains here the details of how that happened. Don't know why they let go of it, but it's their loss and our gain. The Yale Law Library has been blessed with some great librarians over the years. One of the early ones was Albert Wheeler, who was the librarian here around the turn of the century. At that time, he was probably the leading American authority on Roman law, and he built up a great collection of Roman law. This is one of the books. It's the Institutes of Justinian that came from his own library, and he actually established an endowment that we're still using, that I'm still using to this day to buy books on Roman and foreign law for our rare book collection. So that's, it's been a wonderful blessing. Another one of the librarians we had, Frederick Hicks, who was the librarian here until 1945. He was a great librarian. He acquired a lot of things for our collection. One of the things, he acquired a number of notebooks from the Litchfield Law School. The Litchfield Law School was the first standalone law school in the United States in Litchfield, Connecticut. We have probably the largest single collection of these notebooks in any library, and they're being studied because they tell a lot about the history of American law and American legal education. Here's something we've added recently. We still collect in the history of legal education. This is a notebook that was used by a Vermont lawyer named Phineas Wheeler to teach himself law. One of the other early influences on the library and one of the great professors of this law school was Simeon Baldwin, who was a professor here for decades. One of the things he left to us, an enormous collection of these trial pamphlets. This is just one set. There's a number of trials here on procedure and so forth. It's just an enormous collection, and he was quite generous in what he left to the library. So that had a big influence. The next librarian who followed Hicks was Samuel Thorne, who's one of the outstanding English legal historians of the 20th century. Frederick Hicks, in fact, had gotten an alumnus named John Huber to establish an endowment to acquire rare books. This was during World War II. They weren't able to do anything with it at that time. But at the end of the war, Samuel Thorne took over, and he had this big pile of money. And he just went to town. It was the best time ever to buy rare books in Europe. And he used that opportunity to the full advantage. He bought enormous quantities of great, great things. This is one of our treasures that he bought. It's a manuscript of Bracton's treatise on the customs and laws of England. This is a 13th century manuscript. It's one of the most important Bracton manuscripts in existence. This is one of the many things, many things that Samuel Thorne purchased. Thorne was actually an authority on Bracton, so this is one of the great things he did. He also bought for us a number of manuscripts from the library of Matthew Hale, one of the great English judges of the 17th century. These are case reports, and these are valuable in the history of law reporting because it shows that even after printing began, law reports, case reports, still circulated a lot in manuscript. And we just got a wonderful collection of those, thanks to Samuel Thorne. This library has the best collection in the world of the printed editions of Blackstone's commentaries. William Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England is probably the single most important book ever written in the history of Anglo-American law. You can see in the bookcases here, all of this is just part of our Blackstone collection. Here we have a few copies of the first edition, but we collect all the editions of Blackstone. This is actually the very last edition of Blackstone that was published for use as a textbook in 1938. So we acquired this actually quite recently. We have the comic Blackstone. This is a spoof on Blackstone. It's a wonderful thing. It went through a number of different editions. We've got several editions of the comic Blackstone. And we even buy translations. This is a translation in Italian of part of Blackstone's commentaries from 1813. This collection was begun by a man named McGrain Cox, who taught here in the early 20th century, and he collected Blackstone. And the basis of our Blackstone collection is his own personal collection that he donated to us in, I believe, 1913 or 1920, something like that. One of the things that Samuel Thorne bought was an enormous collection, 750 volumes of printed books and 60 manuscripts of early Italian statutes. These are statutes of the various Italian city-states, Venice, Bologna, big cities and small towns. It's an enormous collection, probably the best collection of these materials on this side of the Atlantic Ocean. Here's one of the examples. These are the statutes of Verona from 1475, and it's a beautifully printed book. This is very early use, what's called Roman typeface. the typefaces that we're used to seeing today. It was a departure from black-letter Gothic typefaces that had been used like in Gutenberg's Bible. And this is just an elegant, beautiful book. It's also interesting because the early owner has annotated it quite heavily. So that's part of the collection we got from him, and I've started building on this collection since I've been here.